Orbis Energy, which does so much to do with sustainable energy, and going to see the people at the lifeboat station and so on. And actually it's a huge privilege to be able to do all of that. And of course, so many, I mean, the scientists who are there at CFAS, not many people even know they're there doing all this work in marine conservation and so on. And actually, one of the things you can do is, as somebody who represents, as it were, the wider community in the church, is to value them. And I mean, the thing I've discovered is I'm a bit bolder than I was. You know, if you go and pray with them and give them a blessing, they are incredibly grateful. You know, most of us want a blessing. Most of us want a blessing. We want to be blessed. And actually, I think that's one of the things a bishop can do.
And touching on that topic of getting involved with all the congregations, I mean, Norfolk has got a huge number of churches, 570 or something. Am I right in thinking you preached at each one?
I've not preached in every, no, I did. I can remember going to Potter High one day about 4 years ago, and I thought, I'll sit down and work out how many churches I preached in, and it was then just over 500. There are 642 churches, 577 parishes. I've preached in every benefice or taken services, but I actually haven't preached in every single church. I need to be here a bit longer, because I did work out that if you were to preach in, you've got 13 years worth of churches to preach in a different one every Sunday in this diocese. So, you know, that's enough. Probably.
Yes. Let's just talk about something you briefly mentioned there, which is the Community Foundation, the Norfolk Community Foundation, that you started 10, 11 years ago, based upon a similar foundation that you started in Cornwall, is that right?
Yes, although that was done rather differently. I set up an independent trust fund, which has since become the Community Foundation in Cornwall, because I mean, people didn't always recognise it, but Cornwall was, of course, in the 1990s, the poorest county in England. I was part of a bid, I mean, it all sounds rather old now, for European Union Objective 1 status for Cornwall, which did bring in a lot of investment. But what I recognised was that some of the organisations that I'd helped to set up down there, Freshfields, which was a drug agency, and St Petrock's Housing, which looked after the single homeless, they were all sort of church-based. We were struggling really to raise funds. And so I did manage to get, through pleading for Cornwall, significant support, first of all from the Goldsmiths Company, and then from All Churches Trust, which is the arm of Ecclesiastical Insurance Office. And we set up, I mean, I managed to gather together, I think, about $500,000 to set up an independent trust fund to support smaller charities that were working with the people who were most in need. And that's what led to the Community Foundation. Here, there wasn't a Community Foundation. It had been set up and tried, and it had failed some 25 years ago, I think. So, I mean, I did the same thing again after about 5 or 6 years, and went around. I'd got to know enough people by then, and as I was saying at a great Community Foundation event the other night, I really went to see some people who I thought would set up some seed call funding to establish it. And what we needed was a large charity based in Norfolk to help the small ones, because one of the things I increasingly recognise, and it's still a problem, is that some of the small community groups and small charities doing fantastic work spend a vast amount of their time fundraising or competing with one another for funds. And it's taken off in a very big way, really. So last year, the Community Foundation here gave 3.3 million in grants to Norfolk community groups and charities, and there is now around £20 million in the endowment. And lots of people were deeply discouraging about trying to start an endowment fund, but of course that is precisely what Walter de Suffield did in 1249 with the Great Hospital, you know, and they've still got the land, or some of it's been sold, that produces the income for that to still do its same work. So it was a desire really to make certain that some of the very good work that people are willing to give their time to do is financially supported, and that's really what the Community Foundation does.
And you've been patron or president of over 30 organisations like that.
Yeah.
Are there any others that spring to mind that you're particularly proud of?
Gosh, well...
all of them, I suppose.
Yes, it's hard to pick them out, but I mean, at my farewell service, I'm hoping to have a number of them as representatives of to offer thanks for all that they do. I mean, I shall go and see the Magdalene group tomorrow as a sort of farewell. I mean, the work that they do with the sex workers of this city and preventing young people drifting into prostitution. I mean, it's like, you know, it's incredibly important. It's beyond, I think, some people's recognition that, you know, that 14-year-olds or even younger, I mean, it's much younger than that now, are, well, attracted by older men, especially younger. You know, the girls become more mature, and then they're quickly lured into a life which leads them into prostitution. And so so some of the work that they're doing in schools with girls of that age to recognise the grooming is hugely important, as well as the other work on the ground. And as well as that, I think the Bishop of Norwich is by ex officio the president of the Norfolk and Norwich Association for the Blind, for example, and I've very much appreciated the scale of the work that's done with the people who are not just blind, but those who have very, very serious sight loss, and a huge amount of that's done within the community. We're very fortunate to have some very well-run and very well-endowed charities here, and so yeah, I could reel off a huge long list of them, but I don't like picking any single one out. But what is interesting, I mean, it took me a while to, when I arrived, I think I commented on this at the time, I thought the Norfolk and Norwich Association for the Blind, and we've got the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. And I thought, well, where is Norwich if it's not in Norfolk? And of course it is interesting that all these things set up in the 18th century distinguished the county from the city. And that was one of the things I had to adjust to, and it was the scale of the city in relation to the county, and also, of course, recognising there were different political complexions and histories, and so you recognise that even today. I mean, I think I might not be up to date with the numbers, but 42% was the last figure I heard of all the jobs in Norfolk are in Norwich. 42%. And if you think that we've only got, 20% of the population, that shows what a huge economic driver it is. And yet, you know, people are proud of their fine city, and yet you can sometimes feel that people in Norfolk can be, you know, a bit uncertain about the power of Norwich, you know, to suck life out of other communities. So there is that tension, and I thought, gosh, that goes back to the 18th century, because the Norfolk and Norwich Association for the Blind and the hospital are 18th century creations, but they gave it that title because the city was so distinct from the county. It was interesting. It'd be impossible to think of the hospital in Truro being called the Cornwall and Truro Hospital. No one would know what that could possibly mean.
Before we just move on to retirement and what you're going to do, let's just talk briefly about the role that you didn't do, which was in 2012 when Rowan Williams decided to retire as the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the nominations came forward, and at one time you were 3-1 on.
Yes, that was the time. That was the time to go public that you didn't want the job.
So there were several nominees, and I'm going to read a quote from the Daily Telegraph, which is, they quoted you saying this: "I've served as a chaplain to an Archbishop of Canterbury, and it was an impossible job then, and I think it's more impossible now. Only those who don't recognise its difficulties could possibly want to do it.
Yes.
Fairly unequivocal. Why do you think it's an impossible job?
Well, because the demands, I think, are so enormous, the powers are so limited. And for me, the impossibility is that you are not located in any community. You're a world figure, if you like, in the church. You don't belong to Canterbury even, although that's the nearest. You know, you are living in London after all. And one of the things I know I flourish best in is in a job where you're linked with a particular place, not belonging everywhere. And so I do think it needs somebody who, and actually I think we've got somebody in Justin, who's a restless sort of character and so loves moving from one thing to another, he's energized by the life. He's also finds it hugely demanding, and I was with him the other day and thinking, he's done this for 5 years now and he looks about 15 years older, there's no doubt about it. You know, he does look worn out. But my sense of it is that I didn't know what I would want to do with the job, if I got it, because I also thought I was too formed in a previous Archbishop's primacy. You know, I think I would be shaping what I did if I'm not arrogant enough to think they would ask me, but I think I would be shaped too much by my experience of already having lived there for 6 years. And there is also something very odd about going back somewhere where you've been before. Just occasionally people who are curates return to their old parish as the vicar. On the whole, it's not a wise thing to do. Some people do it successfully, but it felt as if that element of my life I'd lived through, and I don't think I had enough that was fresh to offer. Added to which, I thought probably I wouldn't have the energy, that's needed if I'm honest.
So it's not a job that you obviously apply for, but do you get a phone call or somebody taking you to one side at a general synod meeting and saying, what do you think about this as a potential?
Well, this was the first time they interviewed, and so they, I think it's meant to be, I don't think it matters now, but it was the first occasion that they interviewed, and I was interviewed. I think there were 3 people who were interviewed, but I made it clear I didn't want it. So.
But you still went along to the interview, even though you
didn't have much choice,
in the newspaper. Oh, really?
Well, it felt as if you would be ungracious, but it gave me the opportunity to rewrite the job description, because it was sort of 70% Church of England, 5% being Diocese of Canterbury, and 25, might even be less than that, Anglican Communion. Well, actually you can't travel around the Anglican Communion in just, 5%, 10% of your time. And Justin did a remarkable job in his first 2 years. He went to see every primate, that is, every senior archbishop. He went to every province. There's over 40 of them now. For the weekend before he comes here next month, he'll be here from the Tuesday to the Thursday. That weekend he's in Chile, because Chile is now becoming a province of the community. It had one bishop there was one Anglican bishop in Chile in my time at Lambeth. There's now quite a number of Chilean Anglican dioceses, and he's going out to make that a separate province of the communion. So actually the day before he comes here, he'll have flown back from Chile. And actually if you think about all of that, and then, last night he was at the state banquet for the King and Queen of the Netherlands. You don't have any choice about these things. My diary's bad enough, but when I look at his, it often includes massive amounts of air travel, from which you hardly have a chance to recover, before you're thrust into, well, we're going to give him 3 intense days of activity here. He won't be coming here for a rest. So you know, and actually, I do think you've got to have an enormous reserve of energy for that, and actually, it is to do with call, isn't it? I mean, I can remember when I was asked to come here to be Bishop of Norwich, even though I knew nothing about it. You had a leap of joy in the heart at the thought of it. You know, I know that I've always needed some little experience of joy about it, and all I felt was a heaviness.
Right.
You know? And I've known if I feel heavy about the prospect of something, I won't do it well. You know, I mean, that's telling you something. It's telling you you're not called, I think.
And I think probably your experience of working with Runcie and Carey also was there in the background.
Yeah.
It helped shape that decision.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've decided to retire, which is probably a wise career move, given that of the previous 70 bishops, 38 have died in office.
Yes.
And you're going to move back to native Cornwall.
Yes.
So what are the plans for you and Julia?
Well,
Will you keep within the local church there?
Yes, well, I mean, we don't really want to leave here, but you've got to. You can't be a ghost at the feast, you know. I mean, there is a protocol that suggests that you move out because you need to make space for your successor. But, you know, it's sad, really, because there's so much that we love about living here. We've got so many friends here that, you know, that's a loss. We are returning to Truro. I mean, we haven't got huge numbers of plans, other than for the first time, we'll be on our own together with a bit of time, and we hope we're going to get on, you know. After, you know, we've celebrated 40 years of marriage, this will be the biggest test, really. And Julie will retire at the end of the year. She's at work now. She's a palliative care nurse at Priscilla Bacon Lodge, and has loved doing that, but she's decided that she will retire too. I mean, undoubtedly, I will get involved in the life of the church there and of the cathedral in Truro. Surprisingly, in Cornwall, there are no retired bishops at all. I'll be the only one. I mean, at one stage here, I had 10 retired bishops. I could have had a little Lambeth conference of my own.
Is that because in Cornwall there's some ferocious dean that doesn't get on with anyone?
I don't know. I think it's very interesting. You'd have thought there would be some, wouldn't you? Except they're all in Winchester and places like that, I think, or Chichester. So there's something to be said for there not being too many of them around. I mean, I'm at the moment chairing this independent inquiry for the government into what happened related to Ian Patterson, the breast surgeon who was jailed last year. So that takes I mean, I've used House of Lords time for that, so I've not been in the Lords much, but that will take, in the coming year, at least 2 or 3 days a week. So I won't be without intellectual engagement.
Right.
And that, and, you know, I've already accepted a few preaching engagements.